Sarah had always believed that life changed in big, dramatic moments. But after her breakup, she realized change often came quietly. It had been 6 months since she'd left her old life behind in Seattle, packing only what fit in her car and driving to a smaller town called Maplewood. Just far enough away to start over, but close enough to feel familiar. The town was peaceful, built around a single main street lined with cafes, bookstores, and art shops. She found a small apartment above a flower shop, simple, sunlit, and full of silence. She told herself that silence was what she needed. Most mornings she worked from a nearby cafe called Harper S. Corner, a cozy place where the smell of coffee met the sound of rain tapping softly on the windows. It wasn't fancy, but it felt warm, like the kind of place where people went to think. Sarah always took the same seat near the window, opened her laptop, and disappeared into her work. Writing was her comfort. It kept her from thinking about the relationship that had ended without warning, the dreams she had folded away, and the version of herself she was still trying to find. One Monday morning, while the sky still held the color of dawn, she noticed him. He sat 3 tables away, a man in his late 30s, quiet and composed. He had dark hair slightly touched with gray at the edges, a light stubble, and wore a gray sweater that looked soft from too many washes. His focus was on a small notebook, sketching something with careful precision. Every now and then, he paused, looked out the window, then continued. There was something calm yet heavy in his presence, like someone who carried stories he didn't speak about. Sarah didn't think much of it at first. She was used to being around strangers, observing people without ever knowing their names. But over the next few days, he kept returning, always around the same time, always sitting in the same corner. She began to notice small details, how he stirred his coffee 3 times before drinking it, how he smiled faintly when the barista wished him a good morning, how his hands were always steady, even when his eyes seemed far away. It was a Thursday when they first spoke. He had dropped his pencil while packing up his notebook, and it rolled near Sarah's chair. She picked it up and handed it to him. "You dropped this," she said with a small smile. He looked up, surprised but kind. "Thank you. I seem to lose these all the time." "No problem," she replied, noticing the faint lines of tiredness around his eyes. He nodded politely before leaving, and that was it, a small exchange. But it lingered in her thoughts longer than it should have. The next day, he was there again. This time, when Sarah entered the cafe, he looked up and smiled first. It wasn't a big smile, just one of quiet acknowledgement. She returned it and went to her usual table. That tiny moment of connection felt like something new in her quiet, predictable days over the following week. Their silent greetings became small conversations about coffee, the weather, the books on the cafe's shelf. His name was Ethan, and he was an architect. He had lived in Maplewood for years, but recently started working from home. When Sarah asked what he was sketching all the time, he hesitated before saying something personal. She didn't push. There was gentleness in his voice when he said it, and pain he didn't try to hide. They didn't talk every day, but whenever they did, Sarah noticed something different in him. He wasn't like most people. There was no rush in his tone, no forced charm. He spoke like someone who had learned to appreciate silence. That intrigued her. One morning, the cafe was unusually quiet, and Sarah arrived early. She saw Ethan already there, but his eyes weren't on his sketches. They were on a small photograph in his hand. Before she could turn away, she caught a glimpse of the picture. A woman with auburn hair, smiling under the sun. He quickly placed it back in his notebook when he noticed Sarah watching. "Your wife?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "She passed away 3 years ago." Sarah's heart sank. She wanted to say something comforting, but couldn't find the right words. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He smiled faintly, as if he'd heard the same words many times. "Thank you. It's easier now, but some days it still catches me by surprise." The way he said it, calm yet heavy, stayed with her long after she left the cafe. She thought about how loss looked different on everyone. Some broke apart loudly. Others, like Ethan, carried it quietly, turning it into part of who they were. Days passed, and though Sarah didn't want to intrude, she couldn't ignore the growing pull she felt toward him. Not romantic yet, just human. There was something about watching someone rebuild their life that reminded her she could do the same. One afternoon, it started to rain heavily, and the cafe lights reflected off the wet windows. Sarah was packing her things when Ethan walked in, soaked but smiling. "Forgot my umbrella," he said, shaking water from his jacket. She laughed. "You look like you walked through a waterfall." "Pretty much," he said, sitting down across from her without asking. For some reason, it felt natural. They spent the next hour talking about nothing and everything. Favorite books, travel dreams, childhood memories. It was the first time Sarah had laughed genuinely in months. At one point, she noticed the sketch in his notebook again. A garden filled with benches, flowers, and winding paths. "That's beautiful," she said. "Is it for a project?" He nodded. It was her dream. She loved the idea of creating a space where people could just breathe. "That's lovely," Sarah replied softly. She wanted to build it before she got sick, he said. "I never finished it after she passed. But lately I've been thinking it's time." Sarah didn't say anything, but the quiet between them felt meaningful. That night, as she walked home, the rain still falling, Sarah couldn't shake the image of Ethan sitting there, strong yet fragile, grieving yet hopeful. She thought about how she had come to Maplewood to heal, to find herself again, and somehow she'd found someone doing the same thing in his own way. Over the next few weeks, their friendship grew naturally. They didn't exchange phone numbers or make promises to meet. They simply showed up at the same cafe. At the same time, almost as if fate had written it into their routines. They talked about small things, but behind every word, Sarah sensed an unspoken understanding to people quietly finding comfort in each other's presence. Then, one morning she came in and saw that Ethan wasn't there. She brushed it off, assuming he was busy. But when he didn't show up the next day, or the next, she felt a strange emptiness in the cafe. The seat by the window seemed too quiet. On the fourth day, she was about to leave when the door opened, and there he was, pale, tired. Carrying that same framed photo she'd seen before, he walked past her without noticing and sat down in the back corner. Staring at the picture, something inside Sarah told her to go to him. She hesitated, unsure if he wanted company. But when she saw his shoulders trembling slightly, not crying, struggling to breathe, she knew she couldn't walk away. She walked over slowly and said, "Ethan." He looked up, startled, his voice barely a whisper. "Hey, Sarah." There was a quiet sadness in his eyes, deeper than before. Without asking, she sat down across from him. "You don't have to talk," she said gently. "But you don't have to sit alone either." He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a weak smile. "Today's her birthday," he said finally. And that was the moment Sarah realized this wasn't just a chance meeting anymore. She had stepped into someone's most fragile moment, one he hadn't planned to share, and maybe, just maybe, she could help him find a little light in it as the rain began to fall outside. Quiet and steady, Sarah stayed there beside him. She didn't try to fix his pain or offer easy words. She just stayed. Sometimes that's all people need, not solutions. Just someone who sees them, really sees them, when they're trying not to fall apart. And that was how it began. Not a love story. Not yet, but the quiet beginning of something that felt like healing. The days after that rainy afternoon passed in a quiet rhythm. Sarah found herself arriving at Harper's Corner earlier than usual. Not because she had pressing work, but because she hoped to see Ethan. It was an obsession. Not exactly, it was curiosity and a gentle concern she couldn't explain. He was there most mornings, as always, sketching in his notebook, occasionally glancing at the street outside as if he could catch life before it moved on without him. It was Thursday when she finally saw him in a way she hadn't expected. She had stayed later than usual to finish a freelance article. Outside, rain painted the streets silver, each puddle reflecting the dim cafe lights. She stood to leave, shaking off the drizzle from her umbrella. When she noticed him in the back corner, not at his usual table by the window, he sat slouched, a framed photograph clutched in his hands. His head was bowed, shoulders tense, and his expression, though hidden from most, was raw with quiet vulnerability. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Should she walk away? Was it her place to intrude? But something inside her insisted she stay. She couldn't ignore the silent weight pressing down on him. She approached slowly, trying to be unobtrusive. "Ethan," she said softly. He looked up, startled, then quickly masked his expression with a faint smile. "Sarah." "Hi. I didn't see you there." "You don't have to talk," she said, lowering herself into the seat across from him. "I just thought, maybe you shouldn't be alone right now." He let out a slow breath. "I suppose that's true," he admitted, voice low, almost trembling. The rain drummed softly against the cafe windows, filling the silence between them with a gentle rhythm. Ethan lifted the photograph, a picture of his late wife, smiling warmly in the sunlight, and held it like a fragile thing. "Today would have been her birthday," he said quietly. Sarah felt the air constrict in her chest. She didn't reach for the photograph, but she reached for his hand, placing hers gently over it. The warmth of human contact, even this simple gesture, seemed to ease some of the tension in him. "She must have been special," Sarah said softly. "She was," he whispered, "and I was lucky to have known her. But it still hurts. Today especially." For the next hour, they sat together in companionable silence. Sarah didn't try to fill the space with words. She let him breathe, let him feel the grief and love that coexisted in him. Occasionally, he would glance at her, gratitude shining faintly in his eyes. She realized that just being there, just listening, was enough. After a while, he spoke again, quieter this time. "I didn't come here today intending to share this. But seeing you sit there, typing away like you're racing against time, it's grounding. You make me feel like there's still a place in the world for peace." Sarah felt a soft warmth spread through her chest. "Maybe we both find our peace in the same way," she said. He nodded, and a small, genuine smile appeared. It wasn't the big, wide smile of happiness, but the kind that comes from someone realizing they aren't as alone as they feared. Over the following days, Sarah and Ethan continued to meet at the cafe. Their conversations were short at first, comments on the weather, quality of the coffee, the new pastries the barista had baked that morning. But slowly, they began to share more small, personal stories, childhood memories, favorite books. Sarah noticed that Ethan had a quiet humor, a way of seeing life in subtle, nuanced ways. It was refreshing, and it drew her in. One afternoon, he showed her a sketch. It was the same garden he had begun months ago, inspired by his late wife. "She always dreamed of creating a space where people could just breathe," he said. "I started it after she passed, but I never finished. Maybe it's time." "It's beautiful," Sarah said, tracing the lines of the drawing with her eyes. "You should build it. It's the kind of thing that could change lives, not just yours." He smiled faintly, a mixture of sadness and hope in his eyes. "Maybe I will, with a little help." Sarah didn't reply immediately, but she felt the stirrings of something unexpected, a deep empathy, an unspoken connection that went beyond casual friendship. Helping someone who was grieving, who carried pain so openly, yet quietly, was opening a new part of her heart she hadn't realized was still tender. Weeks passed, and their bond deepened. They didn't declare anything, didn't make promises. They simply existed in each other's presence. Sarah would bring her laptop to work on articles. Ethan would bring his sketches. Sometimes they worked side by side in silence. Other times, they spoke quietly about life, grief, dreams, and fears. Each conversation, each moment was carefully measured, as if they both feared moving too quickly and shattering the fragile comfort they had found. Sarah learned more about Ethan with every meeting. He loved small details, the way light played through the trees in the afternoon, the sound of old piano music, the smell of rain on warm pavement. He had been devoted to his late wife, but he wasn't trapped by the past. He simply carried it with care. One rainy evening, as the cafe emptied and only the two of them remained, Sarah asked, "Do you ever feel like you're ready to move forward?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "I want to, but it's complicated." Some days it feels impossible. Other days, I feel like I could take small steps. Today, for example, sitting here with you, it feels possible." Sarah smiled. Maybe that's all moving forward really is. Small steps, not big leaps. He nodded. Yes, small steps. And maybe someone to walk with. It was the first time he used the word someone in a way that included her. She felt her heart catch, not in fear, but in understanding. Healing, it seemed, was not a solo journey. A few days later, Ethan invited her to visit the garden site. He had begun sketching. "I think I need someone to look at it with me," he said, "to see it the way I imagined it." "Before it becomes real," Sarah agreed, curious and touched by the trust he was showing. When she arrived, she found a small patch of land behind the old community center, quiet and hidden. Flowers had begun to bloom in irregular patches, benches sat in various spots, and small stones marked pathways. It was incomplete, but full of potential, much like the two of them. This was her dream, Etha said, showing her a small section he had started planting. She wanted a place for people to come and pause, a place to breathe. "I can see that," Sarah said softly. "It feels peaceful." "It does," he said. "And somehow it feels like I can start again, slowly, carefully." Sarah realized in that moment that helping Ethan, just being there, listening, showing kindness, had helped her too. She had carried her own wounds quietly for months, believing she needed solitude to heal. But sitting beside him, witnessing his grief and hope, she felt her own heart open again. Over the next few weeks, they worked on the garden together. Not physically in labor, but in planning, discussing layouts, choosing flowers. Their collaboration wasn't romantic yet. It was simply two people sharing care, creativity, and understanding. But in that shared space, a quiet intimacy developed. Ethan began to trust her with more than sketches. He spoke about his life with his late wife, the dreams they shared, and the quiet regrets he carried. Sarah, in turn, shared her own experiences, the relationship she had left behind, the doubts about herself, the fear of opening up too soon. Through these exchanges, a subtle bond formed. It was not explosive or immediate. It was slow, steady, and profound. One morning, while they were sketching new pathways for the garden, Ethan said quietly, "You helped me more than you know that day in the cafe. You didn't try to fix me. You just sat with me." That meant everything. Sarah felt her chest tighten. I think sometimes that's all people need, someone to sit beside them, not to solve their pain, but just to exist in it with them. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. "Exactly. And I think maybe that's what we're doing for each other now." As they stood together, looking at the growing garden and the rain-soaked streets beyond, Sarah understood that life's unexpected moments, moments of grief, trust, and quiet connection could change a person entirely. Ethan had unknowingly taught her that healing could be found not just in solitude, but in shared understanding, and in helping him, she had begun helping herself. The following weeks brought a quiet rhythm to Sarah and Ethan's days. Each morning, she arrived at Harper's Corner a little earlier than necessary. Not just for coffee or work, but because of the comfort his presence offered. Ethan, too, seemed to find solace in their shared routine. They didn't rush, didn't push for labels or declarations, but their silent understanding grew stronger with each meeting. It was subtle, a glance that lasted longer than usual, a shared laugh over some small absurdity in the cafe, or a gentle touch of hands when passing sketches or pencils. One morning, the air was crisp, hinting at the coming summer. Sarah found Ethan waiting for her outside the cafe, holding a folder of sketches rather than the usual notebook. "I thought we could plan the next part of the garden," he said, voice quiet but steady. She smiled, feeling that familiar warmth in her chest. Together, they walked to the site, the garden slowly taking shape under Ethan's careful guidance. The flowers had started to bloom, and the small benches he'd placed were beginning to create that peaceful refuge he had envisioned. As they moved through the garden, Ethan began explaining his designs in detail. "This path here is for people to linger," he said. And these flowers, they're meant to remind you of hope." Sarah listened intently, impressed not only by his vision but by the gentle way he spoke, as if every word carried a piece of his heart. She realized how much thought he had put into every detail, not just for the garden, but for the memory of someone he loved and had lost. After a few hours, they paused on one of the benches, and for the first time, they truly looked at each other. The conversation shifted from sketches and plans to life itself. Ethan told Sarah more about the years after his wife passed, the silence that had filled his apartment, the evenings spent staring at empty rooms, the slow, painful process of learning to live with absence rather than against it. Sarah shared her own experiences, the heartbreak of her previous relationship, the loneliness that sometimes felt suffocating, and the fear of being vulnerable again. Their confessions weren't dramatic or overly emotional. They were honest, simple, and human. There was no rush to fix anything, no expectation for the other to have answers. Just listening, just acknowledging, just being present. It was in these moments that Sarah felt the depth of connection growing, deeper than any fleeting attraction she had ever felt. Weeks turned into months. The garden grew steadily, transforming from a small patch of earth into a tranquil space filled with color, light, and life. It became a place not only of memory, but of renewal. Ethan worked tirelessly, often sketching new sections or planting seeds that would bloom the following season. Sarah supported him, offering ideas, helping with planning, or simply sitting beside him as he worked, offering quiet companionship. One afternoon, while arranging new flower beds, Ethan paused and looked at her. "You know, Sarah," he said, "helping me with this garden, helping me remember what it feels like to care about something again. It's changed me." Sarah smiled. "It's changed me too," she admitted. "Being here with you, seeing you rebuild, it reminds me that people can start over, even after they think it's impossible." He nodded, his gaze soft. "I think we're both learning that healing doesn't happen alone." It was true. Their bond was no longer just about empathy or kindness. It had become a shared journey of understanding, patience, and gentle trust. They laughed more, talked more, and sometimes sat in comfortable silence, just feeling the presence of someone who truly cared. One evening, Ethan asked Sarah to come to the cafe after work. Curious, she agreed, arriving to find him with a small box in hand. "I wanted to show you something," he said, his voice a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Inside the box were sketches, new ideas for the garden, designs for benches, pathways, and a small water feature he had been imagining. But along with the designs was a note he had written, simple and heartfelt, "For someone who helped me remember how to hope." Sarah's chest tightened. She hadn't expected words like that, hadn't expected recognition of how much her quiet presence had mattered. "Ethan," she started, unsure of what to say. He smiled softly. "I don't have the words to describe it properly, but you've made everything easier, brighter." The next weekend, Ethan invited Sarah to a small unveiling of the garden. He had arranged it so that it felt like a secret, hidden away behind tall hedges, revealing its beauty gradually. When Sarah walked in, she was struck by how much had changed. Flowers of every color waved gently in the breeze. Benches were arranged thoughtfully, and pathways led visitors through quiet corners of reflection and peace. It wasn't just a garden. It was a sanctuary. "This is amazing," she said, turning to him. "She would have loved it." "She did," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But now, it's also ours in a way. A place where people can come and find something they didn't even know they needed. Maybe hope, maybe peace. Just like you helped me find." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Their hands brushed, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. Not because it was romantic in a dramatic way, but because it felt natural to people who had shared pain, understanding, and healing, finally allowing themselves to be seen fully by one another. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft oranges and purples, they walked slowly through the garden. Children laughed in the distance, a gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers, and the world seemed quieter, gentler, and full of possibility. Ethan paused by a small bench they had designed together and sat down, motioning for Sarah to join him. "You know," he said, "helping me heal, listening to me, being here. It's more than I could have hoped for. And I hope you feel the same way." Sarah looked at him, her heart full. "I do," she said simply. "More than I can explain." And in that moment, it didn't matter that the past was filled with loss or mistakes. What mattered was the here and now, the quiet, steady love that had grown from empathy, trust, and shared moments of vulnerability. The months that followed were filled with similar days, long walks, shared coffees, quiet evenings, and plans for the garden's future. They didn't rush. They didn't force labels or make promises too soon. Their bond was not about passion or drama. It was about connection, support, and the beauty of being seen and understood. Sarah often thought back to that first rainy afternoon when she had found him holding the photograph in the cafe. If she hadn't gone over to sit with him, she realized neither of them would have discovered the quiet magic of shared presence. She had thought she was helping him, but he had helped her just as much to see that life could be gentle again, that hearts could heal, and that trust could grow slowly, like the flowers in the garden they had nurtured together. One morning, as they sat at their favorite cafe table, sipping coffee and sharing sketches for a new flower bed, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand in both of his. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. For sitting with me, for listening, for helping me remember that life can still be beautiful." Sarah squeezed his hand. "And thank you," she replied, "for letting me be here, for showing me how to care again, for letting me see you." They sat there for a while, letting the quiet stretch between them. Outside, the town of Maplewood went about its day, unaware of the small, profound healing that had taken place in that cafe and in the garden. But Sarah and Ethan didn't need anyone else to understand. They had found something rare, a companionship built on trust, patience, empathy, and quiet love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the cafe walls, they made a silent promise to continue, not rushing, not forcing, but allowing their bond to grow naturally. Healing, they had learned, was not a destination. It was a journey, and sometimes was even better when shared with someone who truly understood you. In the months that followed, the garden became a symbol for both of them, a reminder that even after loss, after pain, after quiet loneliness, life could bloom again. And sometimes the people who enter your life, unexpectedly, the ones who appear in moments you never anticipate, can help you find your heart. When you thought it was lost forever, Ethan and Sarah didn't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Their story was simple. Two people brought together by chance, held together by trust, and nurtured by shared healing. The garden grew, their bond grew, and in the quiet of Maplewood, they discovered that love could be gentle, enduring, and quietly transformative. And in helping him, Sarah had found herself again, not as a person defined by past pain, but as someone capable of empathy, love, and hope. It was the kind of ending that wasn't really an ending at all. It was a beginning, small, steady, and full of possibility.